Welcome to Saturday's Warrior. I am Trevor, and I got with me tonight Adam, as we are going to look back on BYU's first season in the Big 12 and all that they were able to do in basketball and how they overperformed. And then we're going to take a look ahead at the tournament, make some picks, what we think is going to happen, and talk a little bit about March Madness as well. Adam, thanks for hopping on with me.
Oh, it's good to be back, Trevor. Been too long.
It has been too long, not since football season. So, but we've got plenty of good stuff that's happened since then, and plenty to talk about. I mean, first of all, we are in the Big 12. How fun is this? Past years, I do my best to follow the men's basketball. And I'll catch games where I can, but there were so many games that were just blowouts and they were on late here that I would, catch parts here and there. Obviously the big ones, St. Mary's, Gonzaga, even some of the other teams when they were like San Francisco, if they were good or whatever, I would catch those for sure. But it was just so hard. And like the conference tournaments in the WCC, I just couldn't get too excited about them. But this whole season has just been a blast. I don't know. Have you? What has been
so much
your
fun.
take on the season so far? Yeah.
Well, so if you compare it to the WCC, when you're there, you either play a really small school that you should destroy, and so if you lose to them, it's a huge loss. If you win, it's what you should have done. And the only two games of the year are St. Mary's that you felt like you always should have beat them. They got the better of us towards the end of our time there, but you felt like you should win that game anyway. And then Gonzaga, and they were either like in the top five or comparable to us, and so you should lose that game, or and it just you only had two or three meaningful games a year, and just like you, every week I'm like, oh man, who are we playing? We're competing. This is amazing. So it just as a BYU fan, you got to be gratified at this year coming in. I think it was our last. The last time I was here chatting with you about football, we looked ahead to basketball a little bit, and I just kind of laughed and I said, "Well, 13th is a generous vote for us." And here I am eating crow. And is there anything sweeter to eat as a sports fan than crow? When you're that wrong about your team. Anyway, it's just been so much fun to watch. I love how wrong I was about the team, and it's not just we can get into this a little bit later, but it's not just that we're winning; it's how we're winning, and the brand of basketball we play is so much fun.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And you're not alone on the prediction. I mean, based on what we did in our final year in the WCC, it was not promising.
And it's not like
And
we
when
added people that should have changed everything, right? I mean, we seem to have some strategic transfers, and I'm like, well, I don't know if this Khalifa guy is going to do much for us. And yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. And one of our main transfers, backed out and went to K-State. And so we thought, oh, well, that's not a good sign.
yeah,
And
yeah,
this team has gelled. They've played well. And like you said, they play a fun brand of basketball that's always entertaining at the very least. But yeah, we're in these games. And unlike the WCC, if we get punked by, Santa Clara one night, then it's like, well, there goes our season. Whereas now it's like, you lose to Houston, you're like, this game actually helps our ranking, like
yeah.
it's wild. So it's just entertaining. And it's always entertaining when you're winning as much as we have, and outperforming expectations. But just in general, it's just been fun. And I'm getting used to being in this conference where it's like, oh, I'm starting to learn these other teams, these other players, and how they operate. I'm still kind of catching up a little bit, but it's a lot of fun. And then as I've watched BYU play them, and then it's a little bit easier to go back and I remember how this guy burned us, and then watching them go playing other games. And so it's not just the BYU games; it's the fun of being in this conference and watching, and tracking these other teams and how they do. And so it's just been a blast. It's been totally. I was going to be excited anyway, but this has just been, like you said, really sweet to experience this and in our first year. And it looks like what's promising is it looks like we're set up to reload next year.
Oh man, you got to love what's coming in. You've got Adams, who's already with the program, right? 4-star guy, originally committed to Kansas. And then you've got Colin Chandler coming off a mission, 4-star. And then the name's escaping me, 4-star recruit from Idaho Falls, who's coming in next year. I mean, we're just packing on big time recruits who want to play for BYU. And if Mark Pope is doing this with this group, who are talented certainly, but you don't get outside of Jackson Robinson, you don't get a lot of NBA level talent on this team. They're just good. It's a great scheme. They're well coached. They're all really well positioned. They know their job. They do their job, which is what makes it fun to watch. You do that now with elevated levels of talent over the next 2 or 3 years, man, you got something special.
Yeah, and you mentioned like guys like well, Dawson Baker as well, who's on the roster now. He's a little bit older, but you get him coming and giving you another ball handler, and a couple guys, like you said, off the mission or new recruits, but a couple guys who've been sitting there on the bench this season, practicing with the team, learning the system, and going to these games. Seeing what it takes, and so that does bode well. So I am excited going forward. The difference will be that people won't be caught off guard by BYU
Yeah.
next year. They'll know what to expect, and so
Yeah.
but that's a good problem to have. You love getting everyone's when you get someone's best shot coming at you. But yeah, so this team had, like you said, it's been a fun brand of basketball. It's been a little infuriating at times, and we can get into that. But I'm curious, Adam, where does this team stack up for you amongst all the BYU teams throughout the years?
Well, it's got to be up there, right? I mean, the success they've had coming into the Big 12 year one, being at this point in the season where we know we're in the NCAA tournament, and we're not just crossing our fingers hoping to make it to the finals of the conference tournament or whatever it is. We haven't been in this position a whole lot, so it's up there definitely with some of the best teams. Number one for me, and I think for most BYU fans in recent history, has got to be Jimmer's year in 2011. It's hard to beat that because you don't have that Player of the Year candidate here. That was just electrifying like Jimmer was. But below that, I think would be this team. You could put Ainge in his year, his run to the Elite Eight up there, but that predates me a little bit, so I can't appreciate that as much. I just, love hearing my dad talking about going coast to coast with the UCLA player hitting his head on the backboard trying to block Ainge while he wins the game. Watching the clips of that is awesome. But I didn't live that year, so I'd put this right behind Jimmer's year. There's some other great years that stand out. When I really became a fan in the late 90s with McKelly Wesley, or early 2000s with Rafael Araujo, and just some fun Mountain West Conference runs that I enjoy. But boy, coming into the Big 12 and doing this, I think this has got to be number 2 for me behind Jimmer.
Yeah, Jimmer obviously, I was out by then, but I overlapped with Jimmer in school. So and he's just a legend. He just completely took all of college basketball by storm.
Yeah.
So
speaking of brand of basketball, that was fun to watch.
Yeah, it was different than this team though. Like we don't have a true Jimmer, and that's part of what makes this team so fun. Is you love having Jimmer. Obviously, we'd love to have him, but having just at any night, everybody has the capability to kind of take over, and that you got to love that from the team when someone's down and you got someone else, and then that can step up. The 3-point shooting, which is fun, and you can score a lot quickly, but it can also be infuriating. But what I like though is that aside from 3-point shooting, like how they get their points is just these cuts and these beautiful feeds, and like they have good enough chemistry that they know where the other's going to be, and they know how to feed each other the ball. And so that to me is something I love watching from them. One thing, and we'll talk about as we get into this, talking about the tournament, is what they do when the threes aren't falling. And I'm okay with them. I know Pope says keep shooting, and he gives them the green light. But what I've seen is when they're not falling, they start, even if they're open threes, they're out of rhythm. They're not in the flow of the offense and passing to, the open guy. Cause I think that's when they hit them well is making the pass and getting that extra pass and then hitting the three, as opposed to just, hey, no one's guarding me. I'm just going to walk up and jack up a three. We haven't hit one, we've gone 0 for 7 or whatever. I'm going to just keep jacking them. And so that's when I get frustrated. I say play within the offense and then, hunt for those threes. Cause when those aren't falling, they can still get to the hoop. And so I hope they do that a little bit more. But it's certainly entertaining. They definitely have the capability of taking down anybody any night and getting hot at the right time.
Yeah, I think living and dying by the three is a cliche, but very much applies to BYU this year because it's I think that's what has allowed us to sort of punch above our weight class, is that we play so well together. The cuts to the basket, the passing, watching the Egyptian magician is amazing. Just the passing ability at 6'11" is amazing. But at the end of the day, our proficiency in 3-point shooting is what allows us to compete with teams that may have more, 4-star, 5-star talent on the floor. We just run that offense so efficiently, so effectively, and we have shooters that can shoot, and it's a double-edged sword. You can't tell a shooter to stop shooting when the shots aren't falling, because it gets in their head. It's a head game, and the way to do this is say, let it fly, guys, and that's BYU embodies that. And so it is frustrating when they're not falling. Because the Iowa State game is a classic example that you got a big lead, they're dropping like crazy, and we go cold. And I remember 7.5 minutes left, they're coming back. I'm like, well, we got to pick it up again at some point. We're not going to go cold for the whole second half. And actually, we are going to go cold for the whole second half, and that can happen at any time. And so I think you got to live with that, to have the exciting brand of basketball that BYU has, and B, to be able to compete with teams that may have higher star level talent on the court. But we just run the offense better and take a higher percentage shot.
Yeah, absolutely. So that takes us to the tournament. So BYU, you mentioned the Iowa State game. That one is killer, not just because it was within our grasp and it was to go in and have probably would have been our best win of the season. And to let it slip away like that is frustrating. See us go cold. There are a lot of unforced errors, which is something that BYU can start doing. I will give Iowa State the credit because it was because of them ratcheting up the defense that BYU was rushing things a little bit. So even when it was unforced, it was kind of this cause and effect from Iowa State ramping up the pressure a little bit. And I saw BYU get better at that throughout the season, but it just kind of, just spiraled against Iowa State.
And I think that's the other side of that really crisp passing offense, where they anticipate where someone's going to be and they're so in sync. Inevitably, that is a bit of a high risk, because you're anticipating where someone's going to be. You run against a disruptive defense, and then the cutter's overthinking it and doesn't take the lane. The pass is already there like it's supposed to be. And that's what seemed to happen against Iowa State, is just guys second guessing themselves because they had some turnovers piling up. Iowa State's known for disruptive defense. And so you run the risk there when your offense is reliant on that in sync passing and cutting like it is. Again, very exciting, very effective, but you got to commit to it. And they've gotten better over the season. I'll be really fascinated to see, now that the season's on the line, every game, right? It's win or go home in this tournament and win or go home in the next tournament, and it's just a different level. Does BYU step up to that and come through in the clutch and be more crisp, or do they fall apart because there's so much on the line and everything's so reliant on crisp timing, exact passes?
Yeah, absolutely. My wife asked me, she's like, so that was BYU's last game, like it's over? I was like, well, there's 2 tournaments, so it could be anywhere from 2 to like 10 more games, so
Somewhere in there.
if it's 10, I'll be very happy. But so the other killer thing about the Iowa State game is that it kept BYU from reaching a 4 seed. Which they might not have gotten anyway with all the tiebreakers. But, so that slipped away from them. So they go from, potentially having a double bye to now, which would have been only having to win 3 games in the Big 12 tournament, to now 4, which if you look at any game as being essentially a 50-50 matchup, I mean, they're not like they're not all even, but essentially any game, like there's not any single matchup where I'd be completely shocked. Like if West Virginia beat Houston one night, like I would be surprised, but I wouldn't be floored, the
Big 12 has been fun like that this year.
Right. Yeah. And so any game is, within that range. So if you say on average, so now, having to play 3 50-50 games, it gives you about a 13% chance of winning them, right? All 3 of those, but playing 4, that cuts you down to now like a 6% chance of winning all 4 of those. So your odds just get a lot tighter there. But nonetheless, BYU has a path which is not completely unfavorable for them in order to, win at least a little bit. But what do you think BYU has to do in this tournament in order to not only help kind of consider the season a success, but also to help ensure that they get a 4 or 5 seed in the March Madness?
Yeah, and I think BYU is a 5 seed. I do. I think they've done enough in the regular season that they're a 5 seed. You could see if they bounce in the first round of the tournament, well, that's an ugly loss, and you could see them at a 6 seed. But if you want a shot at a 4 seed, you're talking about the semifinals. I think BYU is a pretty safe 5 seed. But if you want a 4 seed in March Madness, I think you got to get past Texas Tech and get to Houston, and that's a game you can lose and still see your seed improve based on what it is now. Because right
That's
now,
what I was
almost
saying.
everybody's
Hey, we,
got them at
we
a
lost to
yeah.
Houston, and we actually benefit from it.
That's right. That's right. So I think that's where BYU's got to set their sights on. I mean, obviously you set your sights on the championship. That's what every player is going to be thinking. But really, if you're going to impact March, you got to get to the semis. If you win the tournament, that's a totally different conversation. And I just don't think BYU's there to beat Houston and beat Baylor or Iowa State on a neutral court. So I don't think they're quite there, but I think they can get past Texas Tech, and that's where really they have an impact and push for that 4 seed in the tournament, which would be huge.
At what point do you think, like, don't focus on this so much? I mean, obviously I feel like you gotta win that first round. Well, I guess second round, but that first game. Um, and at what point do you start thinking, 4 seed versus a 5 seed really isn't all that different in March Madness? Do we really want to start focusing on that and not like play deep into this tournament? Like, do you start thinking about rest? Or you start playing like a longer rotation in this tournament to start, resting guys, or do you go all in?
That's a great question. I think it depends how you're playing. I think if you find yourself against Texas Tech or Houston, you're just getting beat. Then does one game even matter? Does one half even matter? You're going to get plenty of rest if you're out of the tournament then. I think your focus is on winning because that's more important than rest at this point, is that mentality of win at all costs, win or go home. So I don't think it even enters into your mind to rest your starters and to kind of, well, it doesn't matter if we win this game or not. Because it's true, a 5 or a 4 seed doesn't matter that much, especially if you're in Salt Lake. It's a home game no matter what. You can be a 5 seed or a 4 seed. It really doesn't matter. And so I don't know that BYU's seed is going to be affected too much by this tournament. I think they're set at a solid 5 seed. Maybe if you bounce in that first game and you can't beat Oklahoma State or UCF, maybe that hurts you. You land at a 6 seed, but I don't think so. People got them at a high 5, low 4 right now, and I think they pretty much end up there unless something crazy happens.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm with you. I think that you play your best and you go as far as you can because you want to stay in flow. BYU's been playing pretty well at the end of the season for the most part, and you want to keep that going and that winning mentality. And also, I mean, they've got some. When we look at their side of the bracket, they beat UCF twice, but those were both probably closer than BYU would have liked. OSU punked us once, but I think BYU's probably got the feel for them and could do that again. Texas Tech, that's one we would have liked to have back, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a repeat of that. But you think, okay, we could probably, they've had some of their struggles, and then you get up against Houston, who we played really well in our game against them. So, it's not terrible. I mean, and it's actually a win-win against Houston because you lose as long as you're able to keep it a respectable game, which I think BYU could and should if they face them. Then it doesn't really hurt you and could even benefit you. So
yeah, I gotta say, for me, the key game in the tournament is Texas Tech because I feel like you got to get past that first round, and I think they will. Whether it's OSU or UCF, BYU's playing strong right now. It's a neutral court. It's tournament time. I think they'll get past that game. And then I think it's an advantage, Texas Tech having sat that time, BYU having played a tournament game, getting loose. And I like those games where we lost the first one where we should have won it, and you come back and you get a second shot at them. I like BYU in those matchups. And I think that's the one that if we're going to get to a 4 seed, that's the one that's going to make a difference. I don't know that we get past Houston. Houston is playing so lights out right now. They're just playing different than when they were playing us, and they played well and beat us at our place. They're just playing different brand of basketball right now. I think Houston gets to the final. I don't know if they win it. They're going to be against a tough competition, whoever's in there. But we certainly played them well. And again, the thing I love about BYU is you can catch fire. and BYU could find themselves in the final of the Big 12 tournament. They're shooting the lights out. The rims are soft at the tournament, and they just, you get into a groove. No one's going to shut down BYU when they're lofting 33s and hitting half of them. BYU is going to win those games. So if they catch fire, they can go as far as they want. But I'd love to see them win that first round, beat Texas Tech, and do well against Houston.
Yeah. So having said that, what are your picks? Give us. Let's go through Wednesday first. Let's do Wednesday first. What do you
Okay.
think is going to happen? Well, actually, I guess Tuesday. Let's start in the first round, and then we'll work our way through.
Okay. I'm going to go with UCF, and then I'm going to go with West Virginia.
UCF and West Virginia. I'm actually the same there on that. Oh no! Oh, you said West Virginia. Sorry,
I said West Virginia.
So let's talk UCF real quick before we get into that. I think UCF's been playing pretty tough at the end of the year. Oklahoma, I don't know. They've been in a lot of games, even the ones they've lost, and and they just took it to TCU, who had everything on the line there and every reason to do their best to win that game. And so I just think they've got what it takes right now to win that first game. But tell me about West Virginia.
Oh, West Virginia's a pure gut feeling. It's because it's been insanity in the Big 12, and I can't just pick the higher seeds to go through. And I think out of those 4 teams, UCF is the strongest, even better than Cincinnati. And so it's a mild upset. I don't think Cincinnati's had a great year. I think partially because Cincinnati's disappointed in where they're at so far, and everybody's got something to prove in the tournament. But I think West Virginia comes in with the chip on their shoulder, coming in last place, and they'll get a mild upset to start things off.
Hey, there's not a single game matchup that you could tell me in this tournament that would surprise me, like the outcome of it. Now, if you said, West Virginia made it, then past Kansas, but even like in a just a vacuum, West Virginia versus Kansas, even that I wouldn't be shocked if West Virginia, won that. So, it's just like you said earlier, it's just the way the Big 12 is. And so I think Cincy has also been playing well enough that I think they actually played West Virginia. Oh, was it the final game, or it was near the end of the season? And they took them to task. So I think Cincy does it there. Now let's move on to Wednesday. How do you see BYU matchup? Third game, it's hard to beat a team 3 times. UCF played BYU really tough twice.
Yeah, and I think this one's going to come down to the wire as well. I don't think it's BYU in a blowout. You're going to have some tournament jitters. BYU's notorious for slow starts. UCF's going to go up 12-2 on us, and we're going to be playing, from behind. But we'll catch fire. We'll settle down in the second half and get the victory.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's not a gimme in either one of these matchups. I mean, that's why you say, like, there's a real chance that BYU loses in that first round, which would be disappointing after the season we've had. But I think that BYU's been playing well enough. I think they win at least one game in this tournament, which they've really got to do if they want to hold on to their seeding. If you notice, we stayed at 20 in the rankings this week, and so that's
dead even.
It shows that the loss didn't hurt too much, but at the same time, we weren't able to move up in that regard. So, all right, Oklahoma TCU. This should be a good one.
This would be good, and I'll tell you, I would have had TCU in this, but they are stumbling to the finish line, and I'm going to pick Oklahoma in this. I just don't have enough confidence in TCU. Oklahoma was a former top 15 team this year, and have obviously fallen apart later in the season. But I think they got enough to get past this first game in the tournament before they get cooked by Houston.
Yeah, this is when I sat up for a while, and I could see it going either way. You're right. TCU hasn't looked great, but I think they pulled themselves together. Remember, this is a team that beat Houston earlier in the season. Like you said, that was a long time ago, but I think they can rally past Oklahoma. At least I hope they can. I'm not rooting for the 2 outgoing schools at all, but which takes us to Kansas State, Texas.
Yeah, Kansas State in this one. Kansas State's been hot and cold. I mean, had the emotional victory over Kansas and then just can't figure it out, it seems, after that. They're a good team. Got some solid aspects to what they bring to the court, and I think it's going to be just enough to get past Texas. Again, not too much insanity on Wednesday, but enough to get Kansas State by Texas.
Wow. Yeah, I hope so. And they, certainly played us tough in that last game, and then they went and got just boat raced by Kansas. So, like you
Yeah.
said, so just kind of all over the place there. West Virginia against Kansas. Can West Virginia pull off the other upset?
They cannot, but you got to make your pick.
Yeah, I forgot mine. I actually think Texas does it. Why? Because I don't want them to, and I feel like they will. No, I mean they've been coming on as of late, and Texas has always been a tough team this year. So I haven't been completely convinced by Kansas State, honestly, and which is too bad after the run they had last year and kind of became the darling of the tournament in many regards. So I think Texas does it.
Okay. I'm going to take Kansas over West Virginia. Well, West Virginia is going to be upstart for one game. They're not going to be able to handle Kansas, and Kansas will go play Baylor on Thursday.
Yeah, I think Kansas does it. While they are very top heavy, not a lot of depth, I think that is more than enough to help them get past West Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
Which brings us back to the matchup we've all been thinking about, BYU versus Texas Tech.
Yeah, I'm going to go on hope and put BYU into the semifinals. I don't know that that's going to happen for sure. I think that's a great matchup. I mean, BYU and Texas Tech, I think, are really evenly matched. Very, very evenly matched. And I'll be interested to see who comes through on a neutral court. So I'm going to go with my heart and say BYU is going to win it. But Texas Tech is a great, great program.
Yeah, shocker. I'm going to go with BYU on this one as well. I hope so. I think this is going to be a close game. And so on those 50-50s, you may as well go with your heart on it. And so,
yeah.
And like you said, I think you made a good point too about BYU on those rematch games has come out well. And I think this is a team that seems to be able to learn and adapt to the competition, has done well with that so far. So granted, those bounce back games tend to be in Provo, but nonetheless, I think, and like I said, Texas Tech has kind of struggled at times that I think BYU, if they get hot, is going to be able to get past them in this one.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting. One of the things the announcers seem to harp on all season is that how difficult BYU is going to be to prepare for in a tournament setting where you only have one day, right? They'll find out at 2:30 Eastern who they're going to play. And Texas Tech has got to prep, and so yeah, they'll be prepping for BYU. They're the favored team, but you don't know you're going to play BYU until then, so you got to prep for them in one day, and that's really tough to do with BYU's style of offense. And I heard them talk about it all year. Whoa, this is going to be a tough tournament team because of the style they play. I wonder how much that'll factor in, or if it'll be it's a non-issue if BYU can't hit threes because they've got jitters or they're not good on the neutral court. But I'll watch that in this tournament and in March Madness to see if that really plays in their favor and people have trouble stopping BYU's offense.
And that could be a benefit of playing that first or that round 2 game against quote unquote lesser competition, is that you go out there against a team that you beat twice, and you can maybe settle in at the tournament and get in the flow and maybe get some of those jitters out of the way going into that game against Texas Tech. So maybe that's a blessing in disguise. I don't know.
Yeah.
All right. How about Houston OU?
This is going to be tough. So I feel like Thursday is where insanity is going to happen at the Big 12 tournament. It's happened all year. It's just so hard to pick which team is going to pull an upset bid against. Because I wouldn't say BYU over Texas Tech is much of an upset. That's your 4 and 5 game. But something in those bottom 3 games is just going to blow our minds. And I wish I could pick it. I'm going to go with the safe pick here and say Houston because they've been playing such lights out. I'll pick one of these as an upset, but not Houston. They've been too good.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Houston got punked right there by OU or TCU, but I'm certainly not picking it.
Yeah. Next round, I'll take Iowa State. Or next game up, I'll take Iowa State over Kansas State. I think Iowa State's struggled a little bit at the finish line, but they'll put it back together in the tournament. They'll play well enough.
Yeah. Iowa State is definitely a team that I think has potential here to win the conference tournament. However, I'm going with Texas. I don't know why. There had to be an upset somewhere. I know it's crazy.
You love those Longhorns.
quite the opposite. But they very well could lose in that first round against K-State, and that seems very likely. But for whatever reason, I guess maybe it should give me more confidence in BYU. But to see how poorly BYU played against Iowa State and still was in one possession right there at the end of the game makes me wonder. They've got great defense, but really makes me wonder. Are they for real, or I don't know. I haven't watched enough of them, so maybe that's not fair. But so I'm just thinking I had to pick an upset somewhere, and I felt like, probably the team that I don't want to see win will go farther.
It's good methodology.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to take Kansas in this one over Baylor. Kansas has got so much talent. They haven't put it together down the stretch, but the experience there. Bill Self is such a good coach. And don't get me wrong, Baylor's a great program, but I think Kansas, similar to what we talked about, they're going to benefit from that round 2 game and be able to settle into the tournament. And I think they get past Baylor and really surprise everybody.
They could. Do you remember, by chance, has Baylor played Kansas at all recently?
That's a good question.
No,
I don't know. I thought I don't remember there.
And they won by quite a bit.
Baylor did?
Yeah. So, no, I think Baylor does it. I would be concerned as a Kansas fan about just the lack of depth. Certainly, no one's questioning the talent on the team or the coaching, but I think that lack of depth is going to start showing up, especially against bigger and tougher teams like Baylor.
Yeah.
So we're at the Final Four of the Big 12. BYU, Houston. Who you got?
Yeah, I got to go Houston. I'd love a Cinderella run in the tournament, but boy, that's a powerhouse. What they did to Kansas resonated, and that one leaves scars as a Big 12 fan to watch someone do that to Kansas. They're good. They're real good this year. I think they'll go deep in March Madness.
Yes, I obviously agree with you. I've already moved it over. I don't know if it requires much more explanation than that. So, yeah, I think Houston is a force to be reckoned with right now. They're really we have the couple guys at the bottom of the Big 12, and then we got really Houston at the top, and then that middle, which is really deep and very even. But Houston's the one team I think that's kind of set themselves apart from the rest.
Yeah, for sure. And the other game, I'll go Iowa State. I think Kansas has the talent to beat them, like you said, but this is the third game in a row. Depth comes into play, and I'm going to have to take Iowa State, even though that's the 1 to 2 seeds there, or 1 and 3 seed top seeds going in against each other. But I'm going to be wrong. There's going to be more upsets and more insanity, but I'll go with Houston and Iowa State.
Yeah, Iowa State very well could win. I know I have them losing to Texas. They very well could go on and win this whole thing. I'm going with Baylor here, and we'll get this kind of juggernaut matchup between Baylor and Houston in the final.
Yeah, that'd be a good game. All right, I'm taking Houston for the victory.
Oh, you're such a weenie.
Yep. No bold picks there. Playing it safe.
Me too. I wouldn't be surprised if Houston does lose at some point. Maybe they're not taking this as seriously. Maybe they're already thinking ahead. They've already got the 1 seed locked up. Who knows? But I wouldn't be surprised at anything really in this tournament. But like I said before, I just can't bring myself to pick against Houston right now.
Yeah.
At this point. So you think BYU, if this plays out, you think BYU's done enough to earn at least a 4 or 5 seed and make it and play in Salt Lake, which, if you look at that, those matchups, that really wouldn't be all that different. So a 4 or 5 seed. And ultimately, if they both went out, they'd be playing each other in that next round, right? In round 2. And if it's in Salt Lake, we feel good that BYU possibly making a Sweet 16 run. Do you think that they go deeper? Obviously, we know if they get hot at any time, they can. Do you think they do?
I don't think they get past the Sweet 16 this year. BYU is exciting because they're bringing almost everybody back, right? We just had Senior Day, and besides, who do we got? Spencer Johnson, who's not coming back, and he's your
Jackson Robinson could, but like, let's be honest, he's
yeah.
go to the
Jackson
draft.
Robinson will be right. You got to replace him. You're right. He'll go to the draft. Um,
And
but
then Noah Waterman, he's still got to
he's
apply for
projected to
it.
come back. He's got to apply for it. It
But
looks
I
like he'll
don't,
come back, but we'll see.
yeah.
I think you got a lot of returning talent on this team, right? Dallin Hall is a burgeoning star. Khalifa will be back. Traore will be back. You've got the pieces in place to come back. Trevor Nell will be back. Trevor Nell, and so I feel like next year you're going to apply a lot of that experience. BYU hasn't done this. They haven't gone deep into conference tournaments. They haven't gone to the NCAA tournament and been competitive with this group. So I don't see them going far because of the lack of tournament experience. I think a Sweet 16 would be a huge success. But I see them getting bumped in round 2 or 3.
It'll be hard wherever they lose, but if they make the Sweet 16, I mean, there's no way you can call this season any. I mean, already the season's been a huge success, but I mean that is
Oh
just
yeah,
monster, especially after missing March Madness and after missing the NIT, being able to go and actually win some games again and just be back at it would just be really fun. And then something else to keep in mind, something else to root for other than just BYU. With now that I understand the way that the payout is that it's the conference will get paid more for every team that they have going each round, and so we're really incentivized to root for
yeah,
the Big 12, our cohorts there, in making it as far as possible, because the farther they go, then the bigger payout
yeah.
for everybody.
Well, and it's really a big part of your reputation's on the line here. There's always going to be that talk of Big 12's overrated and the rankings are rigged now because the Big 12 keeps playing each other and they're all ranked high, and so they just keep getting ranked higher. And I get that. I hear it. I said it right when we went on the Big 12. Is I had those same concerns. Now that you're in the Big 12, you got to show out. If these Big 12 teams get bounced early in the tournament, then they were right. They were right. We shouldn't. The rankings were rigged, and we just kept playing each other. So if the Big 12 teams go in, they got a strong showing, right? You get a couple teams down into the Elite Eight or even Final Four. Well, the conference, right? The conference deserved the accolades, and so you've really got to show out in March Madness. So I'll be rooting for all the Big 12 teams to go deep into the tournament because
What
it's
are
our
they
reputation
projected
on the
at?
line.
9? Are they projected at 9 teams right now?
Nine, and none of them are even on the bubble at this point. I mean, that's insane.
That's
It's the gauntlet. It really is, and it always will be. Now you're adding Arizona next year. I mean, it's just going to get tougher and tougher, which is awesome because now we're competitive in this awesome conference. But again, it come tournament time, you got to show out. You got to deliver. Otherwise, it's all talk. And so I really want the Big 12 to do well in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, Arizona got bounced very early last year as a 2 seed, but
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I think with 9 teams, like you really got to be hoping you get at least 2 teams in the Final Four, but you got to have at the very least 1 team in the Final Four
You
as
got to
the
have a team
con.
in the Final Four, and you got to have 2 to 3 in the Elite Eight. If you're going to call yourself the best basketball conference in America, you do. This is the time you got to show it.
Yeah. Well, here's hoping. It's certainly been entertaining nonetheless. I mean, regardless of what happens, been a great season, super entertaining. Hopefully that continues on throughout the rest of this postseason. But it's been so much fun, and I'm really excited to watch it and have something to truly root for in March Madness, other than my bracket that I don't even put money in.
Yeah, it is going to be fun. I was amazed towards the end of the season to sit back in the last 3 or 4 games and think we're in the tournament. How long has it been since 2011 when we've been able to sit back in the last 3 or 4 games and be like, well, worst case scenario, we're in the tournament. I mean, amazing after missing everything last year. It's just it can't be overstated enough what Mark Pope has done, the system he's put in place, and I'm thrilled because I've always been a huge Mark Pope fan, but I was worried after last year. I'm like, I don't know if he's going to survive 2 years of us being at the bottom of the Big 12, and even though I felt like he should, and I thought he was a good coach, I was worried that there would just be people clamoring for his job, and I'm thrilled for him. I'm thrilled for the whole program because it's just so much fun the way they play. It's fun to watch.
Question, now that you bring him up, and I should have brought it up earlier, is does Mark Pope go for another coaching job this season? Does he get poached?
I've thought about that, and it could happen.
Success, I mean, that's the deal. When you have success is,
It's true. It's true. And so if one of these storied programs wants him, you could see it, right? I mean, does a program as big as UCLA or one of those storied programs come after Mark Pope? I think he'd have to have somewhat more sustained success. He's going to be a target, but now you sit in this place where you're in the Big 12, you're in the best conference in America against the best competition. He's at an institution that aligns with his values and his faith and offers something that no other job can offer. Is that enough to make Mark Pope a lifer? I don't know. I don't know. He grew up. He graduated Kentucky, won national championships. Is it going to be enough for him not to go to one of those upper echelon schools? I don't know. I see Mark Pope probably leaving for one of those jobs if we sustain success. I don't think he'd jump ship to go to an up and comer. But if one of those big time programs calls, I think he'd go, and it'd probably be the right call for him.
Yeah, no, I don't think he'll be a lifer. And you're right. That's the benefit of being in the Big 12, especially not only are you in a power conference, but you are in the power conference. And so
Yeah.
the only way to go up is if you're at this point, I think, is if you're going to a true blue blood program, like you were saying. And so the good news is that those coaching openings are few and far. Well, there's just not as many. It's not just any job.
Yeah.
And right now, he's built a really fun team that's had success, depending on what they do this year. And he sees even more talent coming in next year. I mean, that might be enough to make him say, you know what, I really want to see at least this iteration of my team through and see what we can do.
Yeah, and I think in years past, a coach like that at BYU would have jumped at like even a Georgetown or a Maryland, right? In one of those schools, and maybe he would, but I feel like because we're in the Big 12, it's got to be a huge opportunity to go for, to where everybody would be like, well, yeah, of course. I would be shocked to see Mark Pope go for a job that's not at one of those storied blue blood programs, because he's got a unique combination of a school that aligns so closely with his values and has such a unique mission, and is in the best basketball conference in America, and he's competitive and building something unique. So I think it feels like for the first time we offer something so powerful and so unique that probably would keep a coach around after a lot of success, unless it's just the job of jobs.
Yeah, like if Kentucky calls, I think he's gone. But
and I don't blame him, right? I mean, if Kentucky calls, I'm cool with that. I'd cheer for him and be like, man, that's our guy, and hope
it would be the right call. It would suck for us, but good for him. So it would be the right call. Well, awesome, Adam. This has been fun. Been too long. Let's do it again, and we'll have to check back after the Big 12 tournament and going into March Madness and see. I guess March Madness is here. We're in March, and
it is March Madness. So,
all right, sounds good. Well, thank you. Please be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. We really appreciate you hanging with us. And as always, go Cougs.
Go Cougs.